All right, it's been a little bit of a hiatus. We've been off for a month, but we're back here for another DeFi Corner. Brady, welcome back.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we've had a little bit of a break, but we're back in action now.
Of course, DeFi Corner wouldn't be around without the support of Bonso Finance and SaucerSwap as well. And that goes for our entire DeFi space. If you guys weren't around, we wouldn't have such a vibrant DeFi ecosystem. But Brady, let's jump into some of these metrics here.
Awesome, let's do it. So kicking things off as usual, DeFi TVL, which is inclusive of liquid staking on Hedera, sitting at about 177.56 million. Still kind of putting along right now. I think not much, honestly, over the last couple months has changed too much. It feels like from a macro perspective, we're still in a little bit of a dip in the midst of this market. I've seen a lot of people speculate that things are going to come back up and we still have time to move forward in this bull cycle, but we've yet to see. And obviously it's all speculation. Bitcoin's gone up, a decent amount, but I don't feel like there's like a sense of euphoria the way that I think there was more towards the beginning of the cycle. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that until things change, I think that 4 year cycle, we should assume that as the baseline.
Yeah.
And the other thing is there's so many tailwinds from the regulatory environment clearing up, and we see how that's starting to impact the Hedera space. I think all the things that's happening in our regenerative finance space with Dovu, with what was it just announced with Vera, those kind of things free up once big entities like that feel more freedom as far as the regulatory environment. But the last point that I want to make is regardless what's going to happen with the bull market or not, the Hedera tokenized ecosystem is going to continue to grow, is going to continue to churn forward. So if we flatline, if we take dips or whatever, that's going to continue to do really well. So regardless if we're in a crypto bull market or not, I think that we just keep grinding forward and we're going to have success.
No doubt. Yeah, agreed with that. And we've definitely seen a lot of the success progress, especially throughout the cycle so far. And obviously it's going to go, into the future as well. Yeah. And we'll dive into some of the stuff that you mentioned about Dovu as well. I'm excited about that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So next up is monthly DEX volume. So we did this change starting at the last DeFi corner, but breaking this out into US dollar denominated value and HBAR denominated value. For the month of May, $203 million for DEX volume. And then in HBAR denominated value, it's about 1.046 billion HBAR worth of volume has been trading on decentralized exchanges on Hedera. It's kind of following the TVL trend. I think things are in a little bit of a dip right now, but yeah, we'll see as time progresses.
And Brady, before we move on here, one of the things that I should have said there in the beginning is since we're talking about tokens and everything else here, none of this stuff is financial advice. Make sure that you understand the risks of getting involved with DeFi and your local regulation before you get involved.
Good call. Good call out. Next up is Stablecoin TVL and liquidity. So again, just as a recap with regards to this, stablecoin liquidity and stablecoin TVL are somewhat differentiated here. So TVL is related to the amount of stablecoin liquidity and in particular USDC, Hedera native USDC on the network. And then liquidity is just the amount of circulating supply of USDC in the ecosystem. And so what we're looking at here for stablecoin TVL is about $7.49 million. This is broken out primarily in Bonso Finance, the lending protocol, and SaucerSwap. It looks like SaucerSwap has gone back up a little bit more with regards to Hedera native USDC being supplied liquidity in the protocol for active trading. And then on Bonso Finance, it's held very stable over the last month of May. It did drop a little bit, but with that drop also came some higher rates for individuals. I think on the last DeFi corner, we had talked about how on Bonso Finance, the liquidity incentives for HBAR and USDC ran out. So there's the protocol's operating in more towards its sort of sustainable trajectory, which does require borrow rates to cover the APYs for individuals who are supplying. So those rates are sitting at about 27% for borrowing and 12.23% for supplying. And that's the rate that you would pay to borrow or the rate that you would earn for supplying.
which is really impressive. That 12% that we're seeing for lending your USDC. I think that's a really good rate. I know I have a fair amount of USDC on Bonzo lending right now, but I guess the next thing that I want to kind of touch on here is the big story was we saw this huge run up in the USDC liquidity and a significant drop off. So it went up to $214 million of USDC minted on the Hedera network, and it dropped all the way down to, I think, 46 million. I mean, that was a significant drop. We were kind of celebrating while it was going up, but as we had said over and over, Brady, we didn't know what was behind it or what was causing it, what the entity was that was causing it. So when it drops off like that, we don't know what caused it to drop off as well. I know there's been a few theories out there, right around the same time we heard about the Circle IPO, and of course they're the issuers of USDC. Maybe it could have something to do with that. I've also heard it might be something to do with the rebalancing of centralized exchanges. And then the other one that I heard is maybe it's just market makers that are rebalancing as well. So we really don't know where that's coming from. I hope you have some additional insights on that. But one thing that I did notice is there was a lot of, that's why people were thinking that it might be Circle doing it, because there were several different networks that saw significant drop-offs. One of those was Algorand, which saw a significant percentage drop-off. It dropped down to, I think, about 42 million from well over 100 million as well. And then it didn't bounce back, but we did see some recovery in the Hedera. It went from about 46 million up to about 79 million. What are your insights?
Highly speculative as well. I mean, it's so hard to really understand in a permissionless ecosystem where anybody can participate. I feel like it's difficult to really know exactly what's happening, in particular with USDC. Usually that type of activity is driven by larger entities. So like you said, market makers, maybe something that Circle's doing. I know with the listings of Hedera native USDC on crypto.com and Binance, that changes the dynamics of its usage on the network. And like you said, typically market makers are involved to support those listings. So it could be a whole number of different things. I do know that there's other parts of the ecosystem that are reliant on USDC or stable coins, such as like the carbon credit markets. So maybe it's something related to that as well. I know we have some updates with regards to Dovu and carbon credit markets. I don't know if it's particularly focused towards that activity, but I do know that for carbon credits and RWAs, having stablecoin liquidity is very important, because that's typically what people are going to be using for trading with RWA related activities.
Well, I think this is another good time to point out that probably the better metric here is TVL. What's actually being used in our DeFi space. The liquidity, it seems like, can go up and down on a whim depending on what some of these different entities are doing. So we might want to keep at least as far as DeFi goes, an eye on that TVL.
No doubt. That's going to be the most useful metric, I think, and the one that's actually been the most stable but still growing is TVL, and that's liquidity that's utilized by DeFi, so real world usage. So I fully agree with you on that. Next up is staking. So liquid staking with Stater Labs and native staking on the Hedera network. Liquid staking with Stater Labs is sitting at about 5.03%. That's dropped from, I think, about a month ago. It was sitting at about 5.5%. So more people are participating actively in staking and receiving HBAR X. So that was kind of interesting to see. And then not many updates with regards to native staking. I know we always jump on and talk about that as something that many people are desiring to see as an increase in native staking rewards. But no major updates on that front.
Well, for now, if people want yield, they're going to have to find other ways in DeFi, and we have plenty of opportunities around here to do that. So we can dig into that some more as well.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. All right, jumping into the project updates within the DeFi ecosystem and the broader Hedera ecosystem. So for Bonso Finance, again, I'm at Bonso Finance Labs. We help contribute to the development of Bonso Finance. It's an open source non-custodial lending protocol. The protocol itself did launch a buybacks program. So if you're familiar with SaucerSwap, they enact a similar program there whereby revenue from treasury is utilized to buy back the token on market in an automated smart contract way. and that's utilized for ecosystem incentives and the flywheel that exists in the ecosystem. So for Bonso Finance, but also for SaucerSwap, they offer single-sided staking. And so for Bonso Finance, those buybacks are applied to that ecosystem incentive flywheel with single-sided staking. In addition, there is the listing of the Bonzo asset in Bonso Finance, which is pretty cool. So folks can lend and borrow token that's native to the protocol, governance tokens. So that's great. And then today was the start of season 3 points, which is the final season of points earnings for the Bonso Finance protocol. The season lasts for 3 months. We just closed out on season 2, which also ran for 3 months. So, those folks who participated in season 2, they'll be able to start claiming governance token rewards starting on Tuesday. So if you participated in season 2, definitely go and check that out on Tuesday. And then, the start of season 3 is today. So anyone who's participating is starting to earn points for that.
So Brady, you said that season 3 is going to be the last one. After that, how are the Bonzo tokens going to be distributed? Is it going to be mainly through that single-sided staking you mentioned?
Yeah, so the protocol has a tokenomics documentation that can be checked out that shows the allocations and the anticipated distribution over time for these governance tokens. And so part of it is through single-sided staking. Other parts are through other liquidity incentive programs, community-related marketing programs, things of that nature. And that runs for a 5-year time span from the inception of the protocol. And next up is SaucerSwap. So, over the last month or so, I think the most exciting things that their team has been talking about is this new branding. And I think it was a video that you mentioned too called Good Morning Larry that came out. So they've been really hyping that up the last month or so. And it doesn't seem like it's just new branding. It also looks like they're teasing the incorporation of usability features that make things just easier and delightful to use on the protocol. So there was one that I saw that was like a mini buy option where it seemed like it was like one click possibly to purchase tokens and in a really easy way, which is cool to see. So I'm excited what they come up with. I know their team has just always been incredibly innovative and pushing the envelope forward on a lot of this stuff. So we'll see what they have.
Brady, I do have some questions around that. So, we had 3 main teams that were supported in this space. We had Pangolin, we had HeliSwap, and then we had SaucerSwap. Now, SaucerSwap has kind of run away with it. We have seen some success from a bit of an independent team with H Suite, but certainly the 600-pound gorilla in the room has always been SaucerSwap. I wonder why they've had so much success. Is it because they were the first mover? Is it because of their branding? Because I do think that they have fantastic branding, or, user interface. I think they have a great user interface as well. Why do you think that they've stood out as the premier DEX on Hedera?
I think it's a combination of things. Foundationally for any sort of DeFi project or permissionless project, trust and community plays such a huge role. And, over time, they've really showed that to everybody just as like a foundational layer for all of the things that they do. And then I do think it's on the innovation front. So, they continue to push the envelope forward on bringing new features to market and updating their protocol to some of the more latest standards across the DeFi ecosystem. So, they're based on Uniswap. And they started with Uniswap v2. They were the first, and they are the only DEX that's offering right now Uniswap v3 functionality, so concentrated liquidity. And that just adds a whole new dynamic and functionality for people who are looking to participate in DeFi and particularly on DEXs. So that upgrade to Uniswap v3, I think, in my mind, that was like one of the biggest things that kind of solidified their presence in the Hedera ecosystem was Uniswap v3. And maybe we'll see. I know there's various licensing issues that have been passed with regards to Uniswap and its v4 protocol. So I'm not exactly sure to what degree of open source licensing Uniswap v4 has or when those expire. But it'd be interesting to see maybe down the road they'll continue that path of upgrading and applying these new functionalities that are coming out.
Absolutely. And it seems like they're innovating as well. So the next thing we're going to get into is Dovu. And I talked to their CEO this past week, and he had some really interesting things to say.
Dovu's been killing it. It's awesome to see. They've been one of a project that's been on Hedera for quite some time. I think they're one of the like, oldest projects that have been in the ecosystem. They secured a deal with Veterans Carbon Holdings for $1.1 billion worth of carbon credits to be tokenized on the Hedera network, on the Dovu platform for folks to utilize. Huge win for Dovu. And I that's been reflected in all of the great sentiment that we've seen across socials. And yeah, so huge kudos to them. I thought that was excellent.
Absolutely. Their token has gone up maybe 250 or 300% since that news has come out. Of course, when you're doing real business like that, that's an anomaly almost in the crypto space. Like you said, they were almost one of the first tokens that were minted on Hedera. Been going strong for a really long time. From what I've heard, the staking system that they have is fantastic as well. And it's also reflecting in some of the other DeFi opportunities around their token, which we'll cover here in a little bit.
No doubt. And I think it's a good showcasing of, I always go back to this idea of is Web3 going to be more augmentative to existing industry, or is it going to be supplanting existing industry? And this does feel like it's leaning towards like a supplanting of, like the carbon credit industry, where they're really rebuilding everything from the ground up foundationally. And this is just such a good like market validator that, hey, this is actually a viable thing. The thing that I want to see is, in every marketplace, there's two sides to a marketplace. There's sellers and there's buyers. And so I think the next leg up that we'll get to observe is can they build out the other side of this marketplace? The carbon credits are there. It's a significant amount in this deal that they've closed. And now it's about, hey, can you attract large businesses that need to purchase offsets and retire them? Are they going to come into Dovu and start to make these purchases and really fulfill the promise? So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting story to follow for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Next up is Hashgraph Online. They successfully completed and ran this Conve AI hackathon. It had about $30,000 in prizes. There were hundreds of participants utilizing the standards that have been built around Hedera AI toolkits. They teamed up with Genfinity for their hackathon presentation, the pitches by these participants in the hackathon. There was a number of venture capitalists across Web3 that joined that were really impressed with all of the innovation that they saw by these teams. There was over 500,000 live streams of this Genfinity pitch session that they did. I was super impressed by the whole thing. I thought they did such an amazing job, and like huge kudos to Michael Cantor and Patches and everybody that was helping make that a reality.
Yeah, a huge shout out, like you said, to all the people that were involved. Genfinity did a great job kind of promoting it and getting it out there. As you noted here, they had 500,000 live streams for that demo day, and I've been picking stuff out, of course, with permission to show on my show as well. And that's going to roll into our next topic here. We have another hackathon that's going to be coming up in August, I believe, and that's being done by the Hashgraph Association. It's focused on addressing issues in Africa, but you're going to be able to get involved from all around the world. And from what I understand, this is just the first one. They're going to be doing one of these on every single continent. And with such a larger prize pool, which a lot of this is coming from outside capital, we want to make sure we do it right. So we're getting all of the participants in the ecosystem, including yourself, Brady. We had a meeting with the organizer the other day on this hackathon. It's going to be a blast to watch, and I think we're going to get a lot of good things out of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to be the largest hackathon that has been hosted for the Hedera ecosystem. And then, like you said, too, regionally is really interesting to me. So obviously, it's starting out in Africa as a region, and then they're going to move on to other regions. But when you start to look at the industry through like a regional lens, there's so many different use cases to take it and needs of those different regions. So in many cases for a number of places within the Africa region, I think there's less financial infrastructure that exists there that would need to be disrupted in order to get use cases mainstream. And so you could definitely see things like payments, payment providers, things in DeFi. There's so many different opportunities that exist. So it'll be interesting to see what people end up coming up with.
Yeah, no question about that. We'll be following it closely. And now I just want to jump into some of the other opportunities in DeFi in general so people are just aware. So I'm going to start off with V1 on SaucerSwap, and I think this is a good representation, at least for providing liquidity pairs, because V2, there's some other things that make it a little bit more difficult to nail down exactly what's happening in the space, but we'll get into that in a second. The first one I want to highlight is HBAR Dino, which has an APR for their V1 of 62%, so that's pretty impressive. Sauce HBAR is at 25%, USDC HBAR at 32%, HBAR Dovu, again, another impressive one, up at 66%, and that's because there's a lot of trading going on, so you see those fees go up, so people are getting some more return for that. HBAR Pack is also pretty good at 20. We have HBAR X Sauce at 19%. And then one of the things about Kabila, the Kabila token, of course, that's one of our NFT launch pads. Not so much the APR. The APR is pretty low, but they have really good liquidity for a relatively smaller project with $775,000 in liquidity. Now, moving over to V2, you can get some much higher APRs, but these are average APRs. And instead of having the entire swath of possible trading range, you actually decide what trading range you want to supply liquidity for. So you can essentially get stopped out. If you move outside of that range, you'll end up with all of one token or all of the other token. And essentially, you're not going to be getting rewards at that point. But during that time, when you are in that range that you choose, you can potentially get significantly higher rewards. So USDC HBAR on V2 is at 84% right now. HBAR Dovu this is crazy, 545% on average. So again, because there's so much trading going on with Dovu, because people want to get involved because they have this huge $1.1 billion deal, you're seeing those APRs go really high. Sauce HBAR is at 23%. Jam HBAR, this is another one that's really high, is at 278%. Grelf HBAR is at 6%. HBAR Bonso, so we see you guys on there as well, is at 22%. So that's pretty solid. And then USDC Sauce is at 102%. Now, one of the things with the supplying liquidity for two tokens on a DEX is you have the possibility for impermanent loss. So there's some additional risk there that everybody should understand before they get involved. On Bonzo, where you're just lending one token, you don't have that risk. So it's a little bit safer in that regard. Of course, you have some other risks like smart contract risk and things like that, which are pervasive throughout all of DeFi. But either way, it is a little bit safer as far as that impermanent loss. USDC right now is the top one. And right now, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, you're getting over 12%. Bonzo, because you're getting a little bit of a kicker there, you're getting almost 10%. And then if we go down, Grelf is giving a little bit of a bonus as well. So you get over 6%. And then Kabila as well, you're getting 4.7%. Now, HBAR, since we're no longer getting those additional rewards that were being provided by the Hedera Foundation, that's down at 0.73%. But of course, that's still significantly higher than what you're seeing for native staking on Hedera. So not bad at all. Brady, do you have any comments on that one?
No additional comments. Well, one thing that I will say, and we, our team jumped on a Hedera community call and talked a little bit about sort of the future state of Bonzo. And one of the things that you mentioned just now is the difference between SaucerSwap V1 and V2. And V2 is that concentrated liquidity where folks can supply and choose the ranges that they want. And in many cases, if you start to concentrate the range, there's manual intervention that you have to do to keep that position active. One of the things that we've discussed as part of the longer term roadmap on Bonzo is the addition of vaults or yield strategy vaults, where effectively folks can come in, supply liquidity to a vault, and then the smart contract that operates that vault actually actively manages that liquidity in different ways. And so anytime there's like a requirement of manual intervention for managing liquidity in DeFi, whether it's for a DEX or for like a collateralized debt position or even on Bonzo, there's this opportunity for a vault to optimize that for users and take away some of that manual management requirement. And so that is something that we're actually working on. I won't go into too much detail on it, but I think it's something that's going to be really useful for the ecosystem. Essentially, it ties back up into Bonso Finance's overarching vision of becoming the liquidity layer of Hedera, where folks could come into Bonzo, supply liquidity into one of these vaults. It gets routed across the ecosystem into different protocols and then helps actively manage that liquidity and optimize yield for users. So, that's something that we're in the development on right now. But I'm really looking forward to that because I think it's going to be really helpful for all users across the ecosystem.
Well, I think Bonzo is going to be one of those businesses in our DeFi space, in our tokenized space, that there's an easy path to sustainability. We also see that, with SaucerSwap, and, we're trying to do that with all of the different teams. Dovu, I think, is a great example right now, but we also wanted to do that with Karate Combat, make sure that it's sustainable. And we were talking about this before. I know we don't have it on our list, but we decided we wanted to talk about it a little bit. When they decided to do sponsored events, the first thing we got Origin to sponsor the last Karate Combat event. The next one we're doing is going to be interesting because we got several different Hedera builders that are going to be sponsoring that event. And to promote both Hedera, everything that's being built on Hedera, these specific teams. And I think in general, sponsoring Karate Combat events, we're getting a professionally done ad. Actually, there's going to be 2 ads done for that. And we got some support from the Hedera Foundation because we want to try this out, see how it works, and hopefully we're going to be able to continue it in the future. But Bonzo is one of the teams that is supporting that. We appreciate you coming on there and doing that. I was really surprised once we decided we were going to pull the trigger. All the teams that I had been working with, I asked them to send the karate for the sponsorship, and we had it done in just a few days. And then we were able to start engaging with the ad agency that we're working with. But Brady, you brought it up here before we started talking today. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like the idea of, and I've always kind of thought this is Karate Combat as a cornerstone potential distribution model for the Hedera ecosystem. I think the access that they have based on their audience spans across Web3 to many users on many different networks. And so, they've just been amazing for Hedera in general. And also they just put on an amazing production just in the first place. But using that as a way to showcase some of the ecosystem applications in Hedera DeFi and things that are happening on the network seems like a positive thing to do. So I'm excited about the advertisements and thank you for organizing a bunch of this as well and the Karate Combat team.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I have my targets set on some more people that might want to sponsor for one of the future events. But if anybody out there wants to sponsor one of these events, you can check out the ads when they come out on the next one. And if you want to participate, go ahead and contact me and we'll get it knocked out. But Brady, is there anything else you'd like to cover before we let you go?
No, I'll go to my end. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, that's all we have for this week. We'll see you in a couple.
All right. Bye.